Hello. Hi. Hi. Review cinema. Welcome to Twin Peaks. I don't watch much TV anymore. The older I got, the more I realized how much of a hassle it is for me to get into television shows. Because the more I started to take movies seriously and care about the filmmaking process, the more I just became okay with just a regular 3-act structure in one condensed thing. Because a movie, you sit down, couple hours, you're done. It's a little difficult for TV unless it's something I grew up on and watched all the way through as a kid. But as I got older and all of these different shows that people call the greatest of all time came out, it became harder to want to make myself watch a show. But last year I watched Breaking Bad for the first time on Netflix because it was quarantine, we had all the time in the world. So I was like, okay, it's in my Netflix watch list, it's been there for years now, I might as well just rip the band-aid off now. And I had one of the most magical experiences of my life watching a piece of media. And after I finished Breaking Bad, I was like, okay, if I ever run into a show that I have even a mild interest in, I will jump in on that interest as fast as I can and watch it the whole way through. And that was the same feeling I had for a long time with Twin Peaks. But before we talk about Twin Peaks, we got to talk about David Lynch.
I'm so depressed I don't know what I'm doing.
For those of you who don't know who David Lynch is a filmmaker that I really admire. He's known for these very surreal and very subjective films where it's up to you to figure out what the meaning behind it is, because he's notoriously tight-lipped about what all of his movies mean.
Believe it or not, Eraserhead is my most spiritual film.
Elaborate on that.
No, I won't.
He does have some movies that have a more straightforward, way of telling a story, like The Elephant Man and The Straight Story. But then there's movies that are so strange and so surreal, it really is up to you to figure out what they really mean. Movies like Lost Highway, Eraserhead, Blue Velvet, and my personal favorite of his work, and one of my favorite movies of all time, Mulholland Drive. He's a filmmaker that really likes to challenge audiences, and that's part of the reason as to why I really love him. He also has this very, quirky sense of humor, which is hard to explain why it's funny, but it just kind of is. Like Eraserhead is a very dark and disturbing movie, but it's also really funny in a way. Anyway, David Lynch is a co-creator of Twin Peaks alongside Mark Frost. And I'm a fan of his work, so I've been wanting to check out Twin Peaks for a long time now. And ever since I watched Breaking Bad and was, more interested in giving shows I'm interested in a shot, I was like, okay, I'll pull it up on Netflix and I'll watch it. And then I found out it wasn't on Netflix anymore. Luckily, around that time, I decided to give Twin Peaks a shot. It wasn't too far away from my birthday. So I just asked my mom if she could get me the complete series and the movie Fire Walk with Me. And she did. Thanks, Mom. So yeah, I got the complete Blu-ray collection for Twin Peaks, which includes seasons 1, 2, and the series revival, The Return. And I gotta say, this collection has some of the worst packaging I have ever seen in my entire life. It is impossible to get a disc out. It is so frustrating. I hate it. But that didn't sully my feelings on the show. I also got a Criterion Blu-ray for the film, Fire Walk With Me, the prequel film, which a little bit of a... I gotta say something. Initially, I was gonna watch Fire Walk With Me before I watched Twin Peaks, but then, like as soon as I got it and opened them up, I was like, wait a minute, why would I watch the prequel? Why would I spoil the show for me? So please, if you're going to get into Twin Peaks, do not watch Fire Walk With Me first. It is spoilers galore. So many freaking spoilers. It really does help watching the show first and then watching Fire Walk With Me. So I opened up the box set, realized that the casing was awful, and put in the first disc to watch the pilot, and oh boy. This is going to be spoiler free, but I will be using some clips, so there's your warning right now. The basic story that I can give you about Twin Peaks is that in the small town of Twin Peaks, the homecoming queen Laura Palmer is found dead and wrapped in plastic. Who killed Laura Palmer? That's the jumping point for the show. And that's when Special Agent Dale Cooper, who's an FBI agent, goes to Twin Peaks to solve the crime and runs into a wonderful cast of characters. Twin Peaks has some of the most lovable characters in all of media, but my favorite character is the main protagonist, Dale Cooper. He's also one of my favorite protagonists in all of fiction. He's this FBI agent who's really quirky, works by instinct, and, tries to interpret his dreams as clues into the cases that he's trying to solve. And he has this sense of childlike innocence to him, which all these elements just make him such a fun character to follow around. Season 1 of Twin Peaks is really strong. It really does a great job at getting you into this world of Twin Peaks and, being introduced to all these great characters. I was into it all throughout the first quarter of the season because, I really like this. I can get down with it. It's like a quirky murder mystery. And then we get the first scene in the Red Room.
I've got good news. That the mule wash is going to come back in style.
And that's when I realized that Twin Peaks isn't just any ordinary, quirky murder mystery television soap opera. Twin Peaks is something else, man. Season 1 of Twin Peaks is one of the best first seasons for a show ever. Now let's talk about the second season. This was something that I was worried about going into the show because I heard before, even seeing the show, that season 2 is very polarizing. And it doesn't start off bad. The first part of season 2 is actually pretty great. Some of it's even better than the first season. But once they solve Laura Palmer's murder, it's like the showrunners were like, okay, what do we do now? And then we get to the middle of season 2, which is... it has its moments of quality here and there, but for the most part, it's a slog. It's a complete slog. The James subplot in this part of the season is completely pointless and so boring. And apparently, I did some looking, apparently Lynch was just fed up with the network because they forced him to solve the Laura Palmer murder, even though that's not something that he planned on doing. So I guess he was just disheartened by the whole experience of working on the show and having to do things he didn't want to do to it. So he stepped back and then the show plummeted. That's basically what I've gathered. But towards the end of the season, specifically when the character Wyndham Earle is introduced, that's when the show starts to pick up again. And then we get to the last episode of season 2, and it's probably my favorite episode of Twin Peaks. It is so good. All of these pieces that we've been building on since season 1 finally come together, and it is such a satisfying climax of David Lynch's surrealism with the usual charm of the show. So, season 2 wasn't as bad as I've heard a lot of people say, but God, that middle really does, put a bad taste in my mouth. After season 2 ended with a massive cliffhanger, we were then left with no Twin Peaks until the prequel film Fire Walk With Me came out. Fire Walk With Me was not what I was expecting, which, it kind of should have been what I was expecting because, it's David Lynch. But Fire Walk With Me is a very sad and disturbing psychological horror film. We get to see how Laura Palmer was murdered. And, before I went into this movie, I was like, okay, I mean, the murder was solved during the show. I don't know what more I could get out, through a prequel film showing how it happened. But I got a lot more out of it than I initially anticipated. It kind of does this thing where it reminds you that this, girl who is like the starting off point for this big mystery that, we're all, being entertained by and enjoying, and remembering that first piece of the puzzle, was still a human who was going through a lot. Throughout most of the show, we don't really see much of Laura Palmer. Everybody talks about her and, we see how she as a person affected people, and not always in a necessarily positive way. And now we get Fire Walk With Me, which humanizes Laura and makes you sympathize with what she's going through, the abuse, how she's dealing with the effects of the abuse. And it's really sad. I mean, yes, it is a psychological horror film, which, at least that's what Wikipedia says. But it still has an emotional core to it that's very resonant. And towards the end, you just kind of want to reach into the screen and tell her, hey, everything's going to be okay. And it's really effective. I wasn't expecting that from this prequel film. I thought I didn't really need it, but I got a lot more out of it than I initially anticipated. And apparently, I got a lot more from the movie than I thought, that I realized that I got once I watched season 3, The Return, because there are sequences in Fire Walk With Me that are crucial pieces to season 3, and not a lot of them are in the final cut of the movie. They're deleted scenes. I guess now I gotta talk about season 3, The Return. After Fire Walk With Me, Twin Peaks was done for. But 25 years later, in 2017, Showtime released a series revival with 18 episodes directed by David Lynch. Lynch had total creative control over this show, and once you watch it, geez, it really shows. Now, what do you expect a TV revival of a show that you loved coming back after a long period of time? What do you expect it to do? Do you expect it to just, be a big nostalgia fan service fest? Which, hey, we got all these characters that you love coming back and they're doing stuff together again. I mean, there was that Friends reunion thing that happened not too long ago, I guess. And the Netflix movie El Camino, which, I like that movie a lot, but it does play into that, hey, do you like Breaking Bad, mentality thing. And that was what I was expecting season 3 of Twin Peaks to do. It didn't do that. This season of Twin Peaks it feels like a critique of nostalgia and things that we loved from the past. Because, for most of the series, Cooper is not even Cooper. He's a completely different person named Dougie Jones. You don't get to see Cooper until very close to the end of the show. And it's like, what? That sounds like a critique, but that's actually kind of genius. It's a continuation of Twin Peaks. It's not a big fan servicey nostalgia fest of, hey, remember that thing from Twin Peaks that you loved a lot? It's a continuation of the story. And when it does get to those, parts of the show where it does play into that nostalgia a bit, it feels so much more satisfying. Speaking of which, I did mention that David Lynch had a lot more creative control over this season. It really shows, because this season is so full of Lynch's surrealism. Specifically, I realized how much creative control he had over this season, on episode 8. Episode 8, which, even if you're a Twin Peaks fan and you're not really familiar with David Lynch's work, Episode 8 is the episode that separates the Twin Peaks fans from the David Lynch fans. And all of the elements of Season 3 come together to craft what might be the darkest ending I've seen in all of television. I still don't fully know what it means. But all I can say is, now I know what people in the 90s felt when Season 2 ended. I still haven't stopped thinking about the ending to Season 3 of Twin Peaks and what it could possibly all mean. But that's part of the reason as to why I love Lynch's work so much. I don't need it explained to me. I want to try and find my own meaning through Twin Peaks. Twin Peaks is a very special show. It's very funny.
Fellas, don't drink that coffee. You'd never guess. There was a fish in the percolator.
It's dramatic.
There'll be an announcement from the principal.
And it's horrifying. Those are three elements that I love in film and in some TV. And it comes together so beautifully to make one of the most unique shows I've ever seen, ever. And I didn't even realize until after I watched the show just how big and influential the show was. Lately, I've been seeing Twin Peaks in TV and in video games. Even Scooby-Doo did a Twin Peaks tribute. Fucking Sesame Street did a Twin Peaks parody back in the 90s.
Whoa! Pie. Oh. Diane, this Agent Cookie reporting. Me in town called Twin Peaks. Darn fine town.
So yeah, Twin Peaks is a lot bigger than I initially thought. And I hope anybody watching this is convinced to give Twin Peaks a shot, because it really is a special show, and I've thought a lot about this. I love Breaking Bad a lot, but I think Twin Peaks is my favorite show now. I very much enjoyed my stay in Twin Peaks, and I would come back again. That's all I have to say. Twin Peaks is a great show. It inspired me a lot recently, and I don't think we'll ever get anything that's like Twin Peaks ever again.